Behold, the divine light guides us all.
How about you, Mel Shah? Rakata Yahweh Shah. Rakata Yahweh. Rakata Yahweh. Rakata Yahweh Shah.
Psalm 145. I will extol thee, my God, O King, and I will bless thy name forever and ever. Every day will I bless thee, and I will praise thy name forever and ever. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. One generation shall praise thy works to another, and shall declare thy mighty acts. I will speak of the glorious honor of thy majesty, and of thy wondrous works. And men shall speak of the might of thy terrible acts, and I will declare thy greatness. They shall abundantly utter the memory of thy great goodness, and shall sing of thy righteousness. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger, and of great mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. All thy works shall praise thee, O Lord, and thy saints shall bless thee. They shall speak of the glory of thy kingdom, and talk of thy power, to make known to the sons of men his mighty acts, and the glorious majesty of his kingdom. Thy kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and thy dominion endureth throughout all generations. The Lord upholdeth all that fall, and raiseth up all those that be bowed down. The eyes of all wait upon thee, and thou givest them their meat in due season. Thou openest thine hand, and satisfiest the desire of every living thing. The Lord is righteous in all his ways, and holy in all his works. The Lord is nigh unto all them that call upon him, to all that call upon him in truth. He will fulfill the desire of them that fear him. He also will hear their cry, and will save them. The Lord preserveth all them that love him, but all the wicked will he destroy. My mouth shall speak the praise of the Lord, and let all flesh bless his holy name forever. Show my love for you.
Abanawa, Shabashimayim, Kodash, Haya, Shemka, Yahweh, Malakwaka, Taba'a, Ratazaka, Haya, Aisha, Ba'arataza, Kawa, Haya, Bashimayim, Nathananawa, Lakum, Kal Yawam, Wasalak Kawabwat nawa, Kasalak nawa, Kawabwati nawa, Wala'a, Tabaya nawa, Banasayawan, Abal, Haushai nawa, Mayan, Rai Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwath, Waha'ala, Wahata Arath, La Iwalamium, Aman.
How about you, Mel Shah? Rakata Yahweh Shah. Rakata Yahweh. Rakata Yahweh. Rakata Yahweh Shah.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashum, Yahweh Shah, Bahashum, Kakodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers and listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. All right. And what I want to get into today, is going to, all right, the serpent's agenda, pedestalize the women, destroy the sons. Okay. And what we have to understand, when we go into the Bible, as we always go into, nothing is new under the sun. History merely repeats itself. Okay. Going into Ecclesiastes 1:9. All right. And we have to understand throughout, our history, even going back to Adam, there was always an attack, on the sons of God from the enemy. We're going to go back to Genesis, dealing with the serpent, all right, how he came at Eve, and ultimately it was an attack on the sons of God. Okay, but what the devil is crafty at doing, he made it seem like it was in the woman's, best interest. You know, he presented her a way, all right, to where it was pleasing to the flesh. It was appealing. You know, the woman, being pedestalized. Okay, because if you want to know what was going on, all right, what type of conversations, okay, that the serpent and Eve were having, well, you just look out, okay, in the world today, all right, and you see how even within our captivity, that the devil, gave the woman certain perks, okay. She has been, pedestalized amongst, our people, okay. She's been, able to get exposure and, certain little benefits, okay, from this system. You see, she's been made the head of the house, okay. She's been, looked at as a hero, you know, all that the destruction of the nation itself, especially the sons, you see. And that was always the play. And that's, when these heathen nations would have us in captivity, they was always threatened by what? The sons. We gotta suppress the sons of Israel, the sons of God. Okay, that was always the play. Okay, when they had us down, their thing was to keep us down. Okay, and when we was up, all right, their thing was, to infiltrate. Okay, and they will infiltrate through what? The woman. Okay, now this is not, a lesson to point the finger, at the woman, to shake the hand at the woman, because the woman can have good intentions. Okay, but the manipulation, okay, of Esau was on another level. You see, the manipulation of the serpent was on another level. So you have, even in this system, where women, can have, good intentions. Well, they don't understand that they're operating in the system, all right, that's meant, okay, to destroy the sons of Israel, to keep them in a destroyed, degenerate, okay, condition. You know, so we just shed a light, and I got a video because this lesson was inspired by a video. This older woman, all right, this CJ, and she's, I guess she's a Christian. I don't know, but she talks about, God, but she was a single mother, and she talks about, her sons, and the things that she went through, and she speaks on some things. She makes some points, So I just want to play that when we get to it. But now let's go here, lay the foundation with some precept. This is the book of Genesis 3:1. It says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field." Now this wasn't the actual serpent; it was a man. All right, but they're describing him as a serpent because, well, what's the characteristics of a serpent? A serpent can camouflage. Okay, a serpent is very strategic. Okay, it's very efficient in how it hunts. It's patient. Okay, and then you go into the root word of serpent in the Hebrew nakash. It goes into a diviner, an enchanter. Okay, so he was enlightened on the left hand side. Okay, so it says, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast or any nation of the field, the world. Okay, because this is the most, subtle heathen. Esau Edom was the most subtle heathen on the planet, extremely crafty and shrewd in wickedness, man. It said, which the Lord power had made, and he was created that way. Okay, because he has his purpose in the Lord's, all right, agenda. Okay, it says, and he said unto the woman, yeah, had the Most High said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. Okay, in the garden, going into, all right, you know, in Eden. Okay, which when you go into Eden, there was Jerusalem, there was Israel. The garden with East and Eden. Okay, because the earth was a Pangea. Okay, and Israel was a center. It wasn't called Israel then; it was called Eden, paradise. All right, I done. Okay, where it was surrounded by, other nations. These other trees represent other nations. Okay, And it says, and the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest ye die. Okay, so these fruits, okay, represent other doctrines and philosophies. These trees represent the other people outside the sons of God. Okay, because Adam received their breath, their way, their understanding. Okay, in the second chapter, we read how the Most High breathed breath into Adam. All right, and he was made what, a keeper of the garden. Okay, which means what, he was in rulership. Okay, and he was given a way to govern the earth. You see, and Eve, was given to him to aid him, to be his helpmeet. Okay, to play her role as the wife. Okay, but the serpent came with subtlety, as if he was putting her on. As if Adam, her role, as a helpmate was holding her back. You can be more than that. You see? So he's pushing that just same thing he's doing with this AI, as if it's transcendent. Okay, beyond the bounds of the Most High. You see? So when you go into it, it says, and the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely die. So he lied. Okay? Now she didn't die immediately, but the ripple effect will be a society of death. The standard will be death. Okay? The sons of God fell. Life began to degenerate in the earth. It was a major ripple effect. Okay? But he was able to present it as a light thing. Okay? If there was no consequences for it. It said, for the Most High doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Okay? So he was presenting this as if she was being held back. Okay? And if she partook in this way, and she began to operate outside as a helpmeet, to be more than that, to exercise her options. Okay? To operate outside the discipline and structure of righteousness. Okay? He was presenting, what he was liberating her. Okay, like women's liberation, women's equality, feminism. Okay, he was presenting it like it was a major win for women. It was a major upgrade for women, especially the women of the tribes, because he was targeting who? The sons. Okay, it says, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. Okay, so eventually the serpent, he wore the woman down. Eve, she began to partake, okay, in their way, outside of righteousness, okay, outside her order, okay, and eventually, she brought it to Adam, and eventually Adam started to partake in their way, okay, and you had the fall, and everything suffered behind this, man. Okay, and in this account, the Lord held the serpent, Eve, and Adam accountable, man. Okay, and that's why Yahweh Shai, he on the cross, man, he had to take his stripes for that, and he took our stripes as well. He took our stripes as well. You see, not only did he take his stripes, for what he did as Adam and as King Solomon, but for what we did. Okay, the reason why we're not bound to keeping the law perfectly to be justified before the Most High is because Yahweh Shah took those stripes. He took their punishment for all of us, to make it doable in this time. That's why now it's about getting it right, because we all come up in this jacked up, dysfunctional, okay, society, Westernization, and then within Westernization you have Black culture, okay, which is the lowest culture on the earth, and we all come from that, okay, and we all grew up in this dysfunction like it was normal, okay, because you go back, to the '60s, and when the devil really began to infiltrate, the family, the structure of Jake, because Jake was thriving, post slavery from like the 1910s to 1960s, man, Jake was thriving, man, you know, and this devil, he took it up a notch, okay, and he put these enchantments on Jake. He came at the woman, going back to the 60s with women's liberation and feminism. Hey, he came at the woman, okay? He dressed it up again, you know? And the woman, that became a thing, okay? As, women started to take hold of it. Then he came with the government assistance, and then he started letting the woman, be incorporated into his corporations and his workforce, okay? And it was like, man, this it. I can be a judge. I can be a congresswoman. You see, I could be a police chief. So it looked like a win. You see, but then when you go into how, let's go here. Let's go to Proverbs, uh, chapter 23. But he dressed it up like a win. You see, but he was targeting, okay, the destruction to keep the tribes low, man, to keep the tribes divided. The man against the woman. Okay, the man, being the villain. Okay, that's how he portrayed in his movies and his music. Okay, so when you go to Proverbs 23:1, it says, "When thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligent what is before thee." Okay, and what this devil Esau Edom, he's their ruler, and he presented a meal. Okay, just like the garden where he presented what their fruit. Okay, so it's not talking about actual food; it's talking about a way, a doctrine. Okay, so he brought it back around in the 60s. The same thing that went down in the garden, he brought it back around. Okay, mainly in the 60s with the women's liberation, man. Okay, to make it seem as if the woman could transcend past her natural order. He demonized being, a mother and a wife as if that was just, slavery. Just like every Israelite man was Mister from the color purple. Okay, or Ike Turner. Every Israelite man was Mister Ike Turner. And the woman just had it terrible. You see? So this devil, through his media, his music, he was able to really push that as a culture amongst our people. And it took hold. So it says, verse 23 said, be not, verse 3, Proverbs 23:3 said, be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. Okay, for they are deceitful meat. You see, he presents these things as dainties because dainties is something that, that's sweet, it's good to the flesh, they're rich food. Okay, so he presented this way as dainties, as if it was for your benefit. Okay, which, dainties, yeah, they good to the flesh, you can eat a lot, but it's full of sugar. You see? So you indulge in that, well, while you're eating it, it's delightful. You can never eat enough. You just continue, eating the dainties. But what happens? Your teeth begin to decay. All right, your your toothaches, infections. Okay, they come on the back end. Okay, and this is what we at now. We on the back end. We're seeing the tooth. We're seeing the rotten teeth and the toothaches of eating this man's dainties, man. Okay, and when you jump down to verse 6, it says, "Eat thou not the bread of him that have an evil eye, neither desire thou his dainty meats," man. And this man had an evil eye toward the tribe, because remember, these elites know who we are. Okay, they know who we are, and this man has an evil eye toward Jacob. He wants their birthright, and he wants Jacob suppressed. And how do you suppress a nation? Okay, suppress the man. And what's the best way to suppress the man? To infiltrate the woman. Okay, he did it as a serpent. He did it as Esau. You see, it was always about suppressing. All right, the sons of God, man. It said, "For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, said he to thee, but his heart is not with thee." Okay, so for as he thinketh in his heart, his mind, so is he, and he has a hatred for the tribes. Okay, and he doesn't mind, giving the women assistance and hyping the woman up like she a hero, putting her on a pedestal. He's telling you eat and drink, have as much as you want, because he knows the after effects of it. He knows the ripple effects. See, the devil, he thinks generations on down the line. When he was doing this in the '60s, he was already thinking of this time here. The devils, these elites, they think generational. They think decades. Okay, and they knew destroying the family structure, the impact it would have, on the nation, especially the sons. Okay, it said, but his heart, his mind, is not with thee. He was never. It was never about, okay, helping a woman and making sure she's good and putting her in a position to win. It was the exact opposite, man. Okay, he knew the ripple effect of this. He knew that this was going to be failure, man. Okay, so when you go here, and this is nothing new, because even when you go into Exodus, all right, this is the book of Exodus, chapter 1, all right, and 8. Um, I started at 6. It says, and Joseph died, this is Exodus 1 and 6, and all his brethren and all their generation, and the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mightily, and the land was filled with them. Okay? And it says, and there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come and let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also our enemies and fight against us, and so got them up, and so get them up out of the land. So this new Pharaoh, because Joseph and the old Pharaoh, they had good relations, but the new Pharaoh, he didn't have good relations with the children of Israel. Okay, and he's looking at Jake multiplying. He like, look, they mightier than we are. They built different. He's looking like we got to do something. Okay, he said, therefore they set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Python and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage and mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field, all the service wherein they made them to serve with rigor. Okay? So the more that they afflicted, all right, Jake, the more they multiplied. Okay? So Jake was still, multiplying under the harshest condition. Okay? It says, and the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shaphrah, all right, Shaphrah, all right, or Shapara in Hebrew, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, when you do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew woman, and see them upon their stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. Okay, so you see how it was a target, okay, for the sons, because that's where power resides in the nation, is amongst the men. Okay, so what this devil did in this time, he weaponized the woman to be against the man. He enchanted the woman to be against the man. That curse of the wife having the evil eye to her husband, Esau, he was a tool to amplify that, man, to magnify that curse. Okay? And it says, if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared the Most High. They seen the value in those men. All right, those men child. Okay, those men children. Okay, and it says, but the midwives feared the Most High and did not as the king of the Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. Okay, so those women, those Israelite women back then, they were like, nah, we not with that. And I believe those women, that was doing that, they back now to be, to be delivered, to be rewarded. Because that was solid, to fear the Most High above the king of Egypt. They risked their life, bringing in life. Those Hebrew boys, man, they like, we're not doing it. And I believe those women are back to be rewarded. Okay, but as you go to Eve, she betrayed Adam, man. In the 60s, the woman, they began to betray the Israelite man. Okay, and they chose the new Pharaoh Egypt. I mean, the new Pharaoh Esau, man. Okay, now let's go here. Because one thing that the devil did, with the woman, he put the woman on the pedestal. Okay, I want to get his word pedestalize. Okay, now you go here to pedestalize. Pedestalize means to idolize or hold someone in extremely high regard, often to an exaggerated or unrealistic degree. Okay, now it's not the woman in black culture. Okay, idolized. Big Mama is looked at as just this hero. There's nothing wrong with honoring your father and and honoring your mother. Of course, the precept says honor your father and your mother. Okay, but you're not supposed to idolize a woman just for being a woman. Okay, just because she clothed and fed her children, now she should be idolized. She should be held in this high regard because she did the basics for her children. Okay, Mother's Day, you should go all out. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with getting your mother anything. Okay, or doing nice things for your mother, because like I say, we in a jacked up situation. It is what it is now. All right, so you gotta do what you gotta do. You gotta make the best of the situation you in. Okay, but we're just going into, all right, how the devil systematically did this, man. Okay, how do we get to this point? Okay, so it says pedestalize means to idolize or hold someone in extremely high regard, often to an exaggerated or unrealistic degree, essentially placing them on the pedestal. This behavior involves viewing a person as flawless or superior. This behavior involves viewing a person as flawless or superior. You see, and for the longest, it was like the woman was just flawless, and the man was just the villain by default. The woman was a hero by default, and the man was the villain by default. Okay, now it's case by case. Like I said, you got some trash mothers, you got some trash men. Okay, and we could talk all day about but the end of the day, the default setting was the woman was the hero and the man was the villain, and the woman was superior. Okay, we just thought, well, she doing it by herself, not knowing that her decision making got her doing it by herself for the most part. You know, for the most part, it said typically ignoring their faults. It said this behavior involves viewing a person as flawless or superior, typically ignoring their faults, and frequently carries a negative connotation, and it objectifies the person and removes them from a balanced peer-to-peer relationship. Okay, and this what was done, through media, through movies, through music. Okay, the talk shows, the Ricky Lakes, the this and that. Okay, it pedestalized the woman. It exaggerated the woman to an unrealistic degree. Okay, Well, she was looked at as a hero for poor decision making. You see, she was above correction, and she was just this superior, being. Just because she's born a woman, which that goes back to that queen of heaven. Okay, but this is what the serpent did to Eve, and this is what Esau did. All right, again, in this modern time, through feminism, man. Okay, and you go here. I want to get this, and it led to. Let's go here. I want to get this video. So I want to get this. I'm saying she's an older sheet, Jake. Now I don't know exactly what she believes, but she makes some points. She makes some points that I want to expound on. It's like a 10-minute video, okay? Because this was done intentionally. Okay? Pedestalize the women, okay? Destroy the sons, okay? And whenever you got a nation where the women are the head and women are raising these sons by themselves, okay, then it's disastrous, man. And it's not that the woman, it's not even that saying that women have bad intention. You can have the best intention as a woman, but trying to raise a son, trying to raise children by yourself, okay, especially raising sons by yourself, it's going to be disastrous, man, okay, because you're not equipped to fully develop that son, okay. And even with daughters need to see an example through their father, okay, of a standard, okay, that they can recognize in the potential husband. Okay, the Lord didn't create women to raise children by themselves, man. Okay, now how good your intentions are, how much money you make, what type of environment you try to put them in. Okay, if that son doesn't have that male authority needed for him to develop, okay, it's gonna be disastrous, man. Okay, and we're seeing the results, okay, of that, man. You see? And now we 3-4 generations in, and this is just a norm for us. We all, was born into this. This was normal to us, man. But this not normal. Okay, and that's why I don't yield normal results. You see? So she's gonna go into some things, we'll expound on in the spirit. Let's let this play.
In single mother homes are too many boys raised in single mother homes are growing up emotionally wounded, spiritually disconnected, and stripped of their God-given masculinity. And sadly, Terry Crews is a living example of what happens when a mother's brokenness becomes her son's burden. Welcome back, family, to Family Still Matters, and I'm Deborah. Today, we're confronting an issue many people avoid: the way single mothers raise their sons and how unhealthy patterns can shape a man for life. Terry Crews has openly shared how the emotional environment of his childhood wounded him deeply. But the truth is, this isn't just his story. It's the story of millions of boys raised by mothers who love them, but unintentionally damage their masculine identity. Love is not enough. We need healthy homes. We need healed mothers and sons allowed to grow into men, not emotional caretakers, not servants, and not replacements for their absent fathers. Terry Crews grew up in a home where the emotional load was all wrong. His father raged, his mother retreated, and Terry became the protector at 5 years old. Now today, countless boys are living that same script. Too many single mothers unload their emotions on their sons, turn their sons into their confidants, expect them to be the man of the house, give them adult responsibilities they cannot carry. Intentions may be good, but the impact is damaging. A boy should never be his mother's emotional support system. A boy should be allowed to be a boy. This is how you raise strong men, not emotionally exhausted ones. Terry Crews has spent decades unlearning the fear and confusion he absorbed at home. He grew up afraid of conflict, afraid of displeasing women, and afraid of his own masculine strength. Why? Because in many homes, especially single mother homes, masculinity is punished, shamed, or misunderstood altogether. When mothers scold boys for being aggressive and assertive, shame them for wanting to lead, call their strength aggression, punish confidence, and emotionally dominate them, they unintentionally raise men who shrink instead of lead. Men who avoid conflict instead of addressing it, men who apologize for existing, men who cannot stand firm. And this leads us to the story I want to share from my own life, because God corrected me before I harmed my son as a single mother in this same way. Family, let me be transparent with you, because this lesson didn't come to me through Terry Crews. It came through my own son. When my son was 8 years old, I disciplined him physically because that's all I knew. That's what I had been taught growing up. But one day, I told him to lay across the bed, and he did something that shocked me to my core. He laid there with no resistance, no fear, no anger, no pushback, but submission, like a slave being ready to be whipped and beaten. And right there, belt in hand, God stopped me. I heard him speak so clearly. He said, if you continue this, you will strip him of the masculinity I created in him. Even a mother has no authority to emasculate her son. If he submits to you like this, he will not grow into the man I called him to be. And the Lord showed me something I had never considered. If he learned to bow to me in that way, if he learned to silence himself to survive discipline, if he learned to please me instead of stand up for himself, then one day he would bow to every woman he met. He would avoid conflict. He would lose his masculine voice. He would become what people call today a simp. A man unable to lead, a man unable to correct, a man unable to stand firm, a man who thinks obedience to women is the same as honor. Come on. In that moment, I dropped the belt. I never whipped him again. I shifted to correcting him, finding other ways to discipline him and to correct his behavior. Because God made my son to be a man, not an emotional prisoner. And I praise God to this day. My son is a man, not questioning his identity, not effeminate, not question his masculinity, not silent, not a compliant boy grown into a passive, broken man. And family, some of you need this same revelation today. Terry Crews grew up in a chaotic home, anger from his father, fear from his mother, and confusion. Many single mothers today, without meaning to, repeat those same patterns: yelling instead of teaching, cursing, hitting out of frustration, not discipline, belittling their sons, calling them weak, dumb, or just like your daddy. This isn't discipline. This is emotional harm. True discipline builds honor. True discipline builds confidence. True discipline builds identity. A son rises when his mother models stability, not emotional trauma.
And that's why a man is needed. It's one thing the devil did. He made it seem like the man was optional. Like a man was just a woman's option, not a necessity. When it comes to, guiding a woman and guiding the children. With a man, these things come natural. Okay, stability will be there. You talking about real men. Okay, not these niggas that Eve love. But real men. Okay, that's what they bring: that stability, that structure, that consistency. Okay, because of course, you have to discipline, physically, but there's other ways to discipline and chasten. Okay, it has to be, everything has to be done with balance. You see, and most, women, they're a goddamn tyrant, man. I'm speaking from experience, man. The single mother, most of the time, they come in with all that pressure from the world to try to be this strong, independent, and try to fill up to their hero role that the world said that they are. Okay, they try to fulfill that role, and they got that frustration, man, and it get taken out on, the children, man. They put them sons in. The sons have to be men super early, and what they call sonsbins, and that is just not natural, because we grow up in such an unnatural society, man. Especially Black culture is very unnatural, man. Okay, a matriarch is very unnatural. Okay, there shouldn't even be a such thing as a matriarch. Okay, where the rule of the woman, pretty much when you go into the matriarch, it's the rule, because art goes into rulership. Matri goes into mother, okay, a woman. You see, but that's part of the curses. You see, children are their oppressors and women rule over them. That's part of the curses, man. But now that we're in the light, we just see like that was never the way. And like I said, we're at the point now, we know the Lord, He's going to deliver His elect, men, women, and children, and start this thing over the right way. We just go into these things and see the damage that has been done. Okay, because ain't no way, you can undo all the damage that's been done. Okay, we in the end, so the Lord has this remnant, okay, being awakened, men, women, children. Okay, and He's going to start the nation off all right. Okay, we're going to be changed. You see, but these are just lessons in captivity. Like, damn, because the Lord put us here to reflect. So we reflect on these things, and it's like, damn, this ain't it. We're learning everything what not to be. First us men, and you women, you should be like, damn. Like you should be looking at this like, God damn. You see? So let's play a little more, and then we get some more precepts. And then I got some pulled up on chat too, because dealing with them sons, man, it just see like it's such an unnatural society where these young boys are just cooped up with these house full of women, mothers, auntie, grandmothers, cousins, just house full of women. That's unnatural, and that's why when boys get a certain age, they get to collide. We start colliding with our mothers, man. Because we're not in that right environment, man. This, don't get it wrong. So of course we, you see, most of the ass whooping we got was needed. You see, but then it was just times where we just be clashing because we ain't in that right environment, man. That we need to be to thrive in, man. And the devil did this intentionally to suppress, okay, the sons, man, because that's where the power is at. Esau is not threatened by women. Hell, he give you women all type of money, perks, housing. You know, you can be an astronaut, a referee. You can fight in the MMA. Okay, you can be a Supreme Court justice. He don't care about that. Okay, he's not threatened by the Israelite woman. He's threatened by the Israelite man. Okay, because his greatest fear is us getting that connect back with our power. You done now. You done, my boy. You see the sons of God back, baby. We back with our power now. Okay, we back with our power. Okay, so this shit is over. We finna our shop finna come and reset everything. So we ain't, so we go over these things, but we not trying to case by case and fix this and do an outreach, to the woman and the Boys and Girls Club for the sons. And no, man, we way past that. The damage is way past that. Okay, we just showing that the tactics of the devil, man. So let's play this a little more.
Terry Crews grew and began healing when he intentionally sought out men who were strong, stable, and spiritually grounded. Every single mother should create that same opportunity for her son. If there are godly uncles, coaches, mentors, grandfathers, church men, even stepfathers, if that is your situation, that are godly and are good, decent men. Don't confuse what I'm saying, because some of these uncles, coaches, mentors, grandfathers, and some of these stepfathers can be the very problem in your home, perverting and turning your sons out. So please understand, because I didn't expose my son to many of those individuals. But I'm telling you, if you do, be very careful how you select them. Watch these people. Because a mother can nurture her son, but she cannot mentor him into manhood. If she blocks male influence out of bitterness or fear, she cripples her son's development and often doesn't realize it until he becomes a man who cannot lead. If you're a single mother,
and that was the main point, he becomes a man that cannot lead. Okay, he becomes a man that cannot lead, and that was the objective of Esau. That's why he don't care about, giving these young niggas, like I say, all this money, putting them niggas on world tour, giving them niggas millions of fans, because them niggas can't lead. Okay, they just gonna teach poor decision making to a million other jakes. Okay, you see, and that's why even when you go into the scriptures, let's go here. Okay, that was it on that. Let's go here to the book of Isaiah. I believe it's 51. Let's get Isaiah 51. So this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 51, and verse 17. It says, "Awake, awake, stand up, O Jerusalem, which has drunk at the hand of the Lord." Which has drunk at the hand of the Lord the cup of his fury. Which are these curses, man? This captivity. Okay, this was the cup of the Lord's fury. Putting these curses on us, putting us in this captivity. This was the Lord's fury. We had to drink out of that cup. So we had to become dysfunctional and broken up, the matriarch, and all that had to happen. You see? It says, "Thou hast drunken the dregs of the cup of trembling and wronged them out," man. So we drunk the dregs, the bitterness of that cup, man. And this captivity did a number on us, man. This captivity did a number on us, man. And you read on, it says, Isaiah 51 and 18, "There is none to guide her among all the sons whom she hath brought forth." Now, this speaking the nation, okay, referring to the nation as a she, okay? So when you look at the nation of a whole, ain't no leaders being produced from black culture. Okay? Nigga culture ain't producing any leaders. Okay? It took the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. It took the spirit to come on High Priest Elder Albert Bibbins. Okay? King Masha, High Priest Yaqua. Okay? All these men, that was raised up in the spirit, trickling down to our apostles and elders today. Okay? That's when leadership started to come back to the nation. Okay? That's when men of the Lord started being produced amongst the nation. Okay? But amongst black culture, nigga culture, wasn't no leaders being produced. Wasn't nobody that was being built up to guide us in righteousness, man. Okay? It says, there is none to guide her among all the sons whom she hath brought forth. Neither is there any that taketh her by the hand of all her sons that she hath brought up. Okay? No leadership. Okay? Absolutely no leadership, man. Okay? The leadership had to be revived through the spirit of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. That remnant, beginning with those first fruits. Okay? Verse 19, it says, these two things are come unto thee. Who shall be sorry for thee? Desolation and destruction and famine, the sword. By whom shall I comfort thee, man? So our people that don't repent, okay, because you still got women, they're still trying to carry on the legacy of being independent. Okay, still got this feminist mindset. All right, and it just leading them to desolation. Okay, each generation just get worse. It's leading to famine, it's leading to the sword, to the slaughter, and ultimately to the nukes. The Lord can't do nothing with that, man. As the Lord has allowed this word to go forth, okay, there's nothing that the Lord can do with that type of mindset coming into these times, man. He just finna get rid of it. Okay, we had to go through it. We all went through it, whether, the women that partook in it, the men being born in it, we all went through it. Well, see, there was a remnant that was appointed to wake up out of it, man. Okay? Because we all got, a history. You see? But that's going back to Yahweh Shai. That blood covers us, man, where we fell short, especially when we didn't know. Okay? We was born in a culture and we thought that was the way. We thought that was it. That was the standard we was born into. And we operated based off the wisdom we had or the lack thereof. Okay? So this is beyond playing this is beyond playing the blame game. Now it's time to repent and get right. And let the Lord have mercy. How you gonna have mercy, man? You see, but if not, it says thy sons have fainted, they lie at the head of all the streets as a wild bull in a net. Okay. Said they have fainted, they threw. Okay, they lie at the head of all the streets. Okay, street niggas as a wild bull in the net. Okay, they just entangled, wilding out. You see, and they call in the net of what? Nigga culture, black culture. Okay, the product of the matriarch, the product of the wine of Babylon. They are full of the fury of the Lord, the rebuke of our power. Okay, because we was put in this position because we made the Lord furious. So he gave us over, man, to be a prey unto our enemies, man. He gave us over to the enchantments. Okay? But it's through the spirit of Yahweh Shai that the enchantments are broken. That's why when you go to verse 21, therefore hear now this, thou afflicted and drunken, but not with wine. So when we first heard this message, we were still drunk off the wine. But that was the Lord calling out to us while we were drunk. You see? Therefore hear now this, thou afflicted and drunken with wine, because we was all drunk off the wine. Some more than others, but we was all tipsy off that wine, man. It said, thus said the Lord All right, thus said thy Lord, Yahweh Bashim al Shah, and thy power that pleaded the cause of his people. Behold, I have taken out of thy hand the cup of trembling, even the dregs of the cup of my fury. Thou shalt drink it no more again, man. So for the hopeful elect, he took that cup, he's taking that cup away from us, man. Okay, now we begin to eat on this bread, this living water. Now we're buffeting on Yahweh Shah. You see, now we're being restored back to life. You see, all the way until the time that we'll change. Okay, and he's going to give that cup over to Esau. It said, but I will put it in the hand of them that afflict thee, Esau, man, which have said to thy soul, bow down, that we may go over, and thou hast laid thy body as the ground, and there's a screed to them that went over, man. We've been a doormat in this man's system, man. Okay, like something you wipe your feet on. You know, that's been our status in this man's kingdom, man. You know, like he just wiped his feet off on us, man. Okay, a doormat, you know, and he gave us, you know, this culture, you know, like I say, he pedestalized the woman, okay, but then he destroyed the nation, and that was always the agenda, man. Okay, because this man's the devil, all right, and he's always had this evil eye against Jacob, man. You see, the sons of God, okay, but there's nothing he can do about the Lord getting ready to restore us back to power, you know, and through this preaching of this word, these enchantments are being broken, all right, and there's a righteous remnant that's going to get delivered, man, okay, and we'll never have to deal with this again. We'll never be like this as a people, man. We finna go back to enjoying one another, man, enjoying family, you know, structure, order, power, abundance, you know, forever. So that's the point. Just wanted to get into that. Lord will, you know, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edify. Well, hold on. So lock you. I want to get this real quick because it just goes into how unnatural, you know, we're living, you know. And like I said, I'll be finding things out like, damn, we living unnatural as hell, man. So I just asked, I said, what age did boys leave their mothers and start being with their fathers in ancient Israel? All right, it says, good question. And the short answer is there wasn't a fixed single age, but we can pin it down to a general range and pattern in ancient Israelite society. It said the general pattern in ancient Israel, boys stayed primarily with their mothers in early childhood, then gradually shifted into the male father sphere as they grew older. It said rough age stages. Here's how scholars usually describe it: birth to 5 and 6 years, birth to 5 to 6 years old. Boys were mostly under their mother's care. This included nurturing, basic instruction. They would learn how to read, write. Okay, they would learn a little history of their nation. Okay, from their mother. It says an early religious exposure at home. You know, to pray. You see, and it says around 6 to 7 years old, boys began spending more time with their father. This wasn't a sudden handoff, but a transition. All right, father started teaching family trade or forming practical skills, moral instruction, and Torah basics. Okay, so there was a transition from the mother to the father. Okay, and when you don't have that transition, man, things will go haywire. And then you multiply that times millions, okay, and you have just an off the chain culture, man. Okay, you have what you have now. Okay, it says a boy by 12 to 13, a boy was considered religiously and socially responsible. Now it goes into the BS of the bar mitzvah, which it goes back to the small hand because but when you go to it, say at this age, a boy was clearly identified with the men of the household and expected to act as a young adult. You see that? So men and women, okay, were cultured to be way more mature than what we see today. Okay, way more mature. Men became capable men early, man, especially in ancient Israel. Okay. It says most boys in ancient Israel were mother-centered in their early childhood, shifted toward their fathers around 6 and 7, were fully a part of the male, all right, social world by 12, 13. Okay. So it's very unnatural, the way, all right, that children are raised in this system. This is extremely unnatural. Okay. And it's more detrimental to the boys, all right, that are raised around, these setting of the matriarch, man, where they never really develop. Okay. They just become, these passive, okay, go along and get along, can't lead themselves. But damn sure can't lead nobody else, man. Okay. It's just backwards. All right. But Yahweh Shai coming to restore everything right side up. So Lord will, that was edifying. So next time I say Shalom, Kwam Yashala, Bible Shalom.